to another episode of Gov Tech Today. I'm Russell Lowery.
And I'm Jen Saha.
And together we try and bridge the gap between .gov and .com. Today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about the California state budget. And for .com people, and probably many of our .gov people, the budget process is completely opaque. They don't know what it means. They don't know much beyond the top headlines. And particularly for our audience in technology, they hear $14 billion budget deficit, $24 billion budget deficit. The numbers are all over the place. Based on what you've seen, what's that mean for technology? What's that mean for technology?
I think, deficits are scary, but I'm reading in between the lines here, and this budget is very favorable for IT and for technology. And I think, look, in general, our budgets, we've had this discussion before, right? Like spending goes down, technology spend either stays equal or increases. Like, I think there is a general recognition that technology and investing in technology is a little bit, I don't want to call it recession proof, but it is a little bit like, this is how we spend out of a recession. This is how we spend out of a deficit, is investing in some of these efficiencies. And that comes in the form of technology.
And so when we talk about that technology, when you've seen it, like, when you look at the budget that the legislature passed and what's going on, did you notice cuts? Is there there's some of the big technology? I saw that the EDD project, they had a specific hearing on it. They approved and put some requirements on reporting, but that project is moving forward. Most technology spend isn't as specifically called out at that. How do you, as you're approaching it, how do you look at that?
So we read through every single line of the thousands of pages of that budget bill, and I can tell you I was pleasantly surprised. You're right. Like, they're not cutting funding for these big projects that are moving forward. And in fact, they're starting some new ones, which is very exciting. It's like, we've pushed this off for long enough. We have to do something. We're at end of life on these existing technologies. Like, we don't have a choice. And so I love to see it. I think the one area where there are some sort of question marks still in this budget process is with the federal government, right? Like, if we were receiving match funding for a big technology project at Health and Human Services, and the federal government matches these very generously, either at like 60% of your federal funds or sometimes even 90% of your federal funds are going towards a project, there still are some question marks there. And that's mainly because the federal government hasn't passed their budget.
Right. And about 75% of the money that the state gets from the feds is tied up in Health and Human Services.
Correct.
And there are all kinds of social and political issues surrounding that. But another big focus has been cybersecurity. There have been a lot of grant money has flown into the state for cybersecurity. And there's definitely a reimagining of what that looks like at the federal level. Where we're at in the budget process, from the document you read, is the legislative version of the budget, and now they're going to be moving toward negotiations on the between the legislative leaders and the governor. How do you think people are lining up, or what's the normal engagement with the vendor community in this process?
So, I mean, my sort of philosophy on a lot of this is like, if your issue, your project, your passion, which in my client's case is technology,
right,
if that's not in those big five discussions of legislative leaders and the governor, that's a really good thing.
Yes.
Right? Like,
Yes.
We don't want to be on the chopping block. And that's what these guys are negotiating right now, is those chopping block issues.
Right.
And from what I can see, and certainly interested in your take on this, our technology projects are not in those discussions, which is a great thing.
I think head on a swivel and cautious is the right approach at this point. I've been in that I've been in that room with the governor and the legislative leaders as a lead staffer negotiating that stuff. And money that's being spent has to come from somewhere. So when I looked at the legislative budget, a lot of what they did was fill in cuts that the governor had made in his proposed budget. They spent money on healthcare, on UC and CSU spending, and if they hold on that stuff, and the governor says, well, where do you get that money to fix that from? There's tax increases. They could do things to generate fees, or they can cut other programs. And so that's where that's what bears watching at this point. And that's what I'd be looking for, is some of those conversations. It's really hard to spend money on anything else when you're making decisions to cut people's health care. A good way to think about it that I think the general public can understand is not a single Democrat in the supermajority legislature, not a single one came to Sacramento with an agenda to how do we cut health care.
Yeah.
But they're going to have to do that. And that's a really tough vote for a Democrat to make. And every dollar that you don't devote to healthcare, someone's getting cut. And those decisions make spending in other areas more difficult. I agree with you that I'm not especially worried about technology, because austerity kind of advances the need for technology. But it definitely bears watching.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely is never an easy decision. Like, healthcare is the most impactful government service to everyone's lives as residents in the state. And I mean, this is massive. It's really big. Like, I forget the scope of California's budget and just the massive size of it, because we live it every day. We are in the weeds every day. But I was chatting with someone from Indiana the other day, and they were chatting about their $30 billion annual budget. And
For
I'm like, wait, is
technology?
that for like is that for your health and human services departments, or is that for
Technology?
IT
Is that
across
your-
your government? And they were like, no, that's our entire state budget. And I'm like, oh my, like, California is 10 times that size. Like,
Right.
it's just astonishing to me. Look, and you hear about a $12 billion deficit, but overall the spending is going up. So last year we were right close to 300 billion spending. And this year, the latest projections are 322 billion. So still spending more, $24 billion more than we did in 2024. So you hear about deficits, but like, just remember, deficits are an accounting function. The overall spending is still increasing.
And I'll, just for people that might get confused by that, how do you spend $24 billion more and you still have a deficit? The deficit number is based on a baseline budgeting plus a projected spend based on baseline for out years, for out years. So if you were expecting to spend, if you're spending 322 billion and you were expecting to spend 346 billion, you've got a $24 billion deficit. That's what that would look like. Whatever number it is, the deficit is between what you're spending versus what you were projecting to spend, and that's what the deficit is. But as you said, if people crawl into their shell or quit looking for opportunities because they get scared off by a deficit number, they miss the reality of an additional $24 billion, which our additional $24 billion in California is more than most states' entire budget.
Yeah. I mean, you even look at it, I just pulled up the numbers to look at it like per capita. And our budget last year spent, because you're like, well, yeah, sure, California's big, but you also have bigger population. Our budget last year spent $7,600 per capita. And certainly some smaller states were higher than that. But the state of New York was 6,700 per capita, and the state of Texas was 3,500 per capita.
Wow.
So, I mean, we're working with, three Texases, three New Yorks, in just the magnitude of what our state budget is.
Uh,
So we have a very big job between now and July 1st when, fingers crossed, this will all be in place and we'll keep going. I think for our state worker listeners, which I know we have quite a few of them. What's going on with my salary and with my return to office? How does that all tie into this budget?
So there's a negotiation that is going on right now that's separate. It's separate from the budget negotiation. So that labor negotiation that's going on. But whatever resolution gets resolved in the labor negotiation then gets plugged into the budget numbers. And the legislative leaders and the governor will have some placeholder language in there. It won't be exact and specific, but they've got a range and they know what that's going to be. But I have a question for you on what's playing out with the state workers. They're talking about a couple of haymaker issues for union and for employees. When you talk about a wage increase, and that's tied to the governor's call for return to the office 4 out of 5 days. How's that playing out as state workers are seeing a couple of critical issues teed up?
Yeah. So state employees are expecting a 3% pay raise in their July paychecks. And that was negotiated a year ago in many of their collective bargaining union contracts. The governor has actually put that back on the table as either delaying that or foregoing it in this year because of our $12 billion deficit.
Hmm.
So that's difficult if I'm a state worker, right? That's 3%. It's a raise. It's a cost of living adjustment that I'm now maybe not getting, depending on how those negotiations with my union go. On top of that, July 1st is the date that all state employees are expected to be returning to the office for 4 days a week. Also tough to swallow, especially when maybe I won't get that 3% now that I was promised before. So this is really a tough one for state employees, and frankly, a tough one for the unions that are funded by state employees' dues. So I don't have a ton of insights. I don't think any of us do unless you're at that bargaining table, but all the unions are at the bargaining table in discussions with the administration right now.
This is one of those areas where I've been at the table, and you've got and the union leaders are not at that table between legislative leaders and the governor, but the leaders are aware that they've got to go back to rank and file members of the legislature. They've got to keep them informed, but the members are ultimately voting for that. Where I go to for really good information on this is Reddit. Because
Don't tell our secrets, Russell.
Because you have to listen to how this is playing out among state workers.
Yep.
Because ultimately the union is responsive to their members, and they've got an education process for their members. And so, and I don't know this, I'm not privy to anything, but the uproar over the return to office was legit, real, motivational anger among some state employees. And they're looking for wiggle room on that. And I've not seen any kind of public indication that the governor's backing off of that at all. And so if the governor's not going to back off of that, and that's the only issue on the table, then that becomes a loss for the union leaders if they lose on that. Um, and it looked to me like, because that came out first, that the governor almost said, he didn't say this, but he put their wages and benefits on the table, which then created another uproar. And again, I don't know exactly how it'll play out, and this isn't based on any kind of inside information, but you've complicated the negotiation in a way that kind of works for the union. If they can defend the wage and benefits, will that make it easier for their members to swallow a return to office mandate? And I think if you gave most union members an option of, do you want your wage and benefits increased, or do you want to work from home? It'd be a split, but that union pension in retirement is dramatically impacted by an annual wage increase. That's what you're compounding over time and what you're going to be living off of in retirement. And most state employees have that retirement date and number in mind. And anyway, I think that gives the governor and the union some wiggle room to come to an agreement. Whereas if you take care of the members over here and they lose something over here, you can arrive at a deal.
I think they want all of it. I think they want the 3% that they were guaranteed in their contracts.
Sure.
And they want to work from home. And, you can't win them all. So it gives the unions a win if they can maintain that 3% raise. I don't know, though. I kind of see through it the same way you just illustrated for everyone, where it's like, wait a minute, like, you're doubly hitting us here by saying we have to go back to the office and you're threatening our 3%. I think morale, certainly in the state worker Reddit, is very, very bad right now.
Right.
It's tough. It's tough to be a state worker. So my heart goes out to them. My respect more than anything, because it's been a rough go.
I think that one of the dangers that we're going to find is that there's going to be a 2-tier system, that there are going to be rules for a big chunk of state employees, and there's going to be waivers that you can drive a truck through for people who are sort of in a most privileged status state employee universe.
Well, and then I think we've discussed this actually before, where if you do have inconsistencies between departments, between divisions in departments, it's just going to drive the talent to those that do drive those trucks through those waivers, right? Like,
Exactly.
if I'm able to work from home at this department but not at this department, I'm for sure all the talent is going to that other department. So I think the inconsistency is really more harmful than beneficial for everyone involved. And I mean, we're already seeing that, right? The executive order on return to office was to the extent possible.
Right.
And it's not possible for many of these departments because they've given up real estate, and getting more space and outfitting that space to be able to accommodate employees is not a 3-month process. It's just not. So we're already seeing delays in this from certain departments, and people are going to go to those departments. But what I'm just cautioning everybody out to sort of look at, if I'm a state worker, don't jump ship for like the temporary, because you never know what's going to happen when that extension expires, when we have a change in the administration. It's tough to jump from a job that you love to another job just because of, well, they're doing it this way today. I mean, I think the lesson that everyone should take from this is like, your work situation from working from home can change at any given moment.
I think there's a couple of cybersecurity and technology opportunities here that haven't been fully explored, and it's not central to the conversation yet. But we went to hybrid because of COVID.
Hmm.
And it wasn't by design, it was by force and
Necessity. Yep.
necessity and an emergency response to a pandemic. Um, Hybrid by design can work beautifully, and is where private sector is going and is developing. Um, but hybrid, the way we rolled it out was not in the most technologically sophisticated way, and I think it generates a lot of cyber risk when people are using their home internet. Uh, what device are they using? I don't think we've adequately addressed that, um, but architecturally and by design, that I think there's an opportunity.
I do think, and there was a ton of opportunity when we turned overnight to being completely remote. And most departments have, this sort of hybrid thing down and have come back a couple days a week. But, we're moving from 100% in person to 100% remote to hybrid. And what level of hybrid are we, whether it's 2 days or 4 days or three, whatever. Um, and yeah, finding sort of that happy medium where you're working from your laptop. Your laptop is your device. Your internet access of wherever you are is your internet access, and the security levels on that internet are wherever you're connecting to. It is. It's certainly an opportunity, and it's one that I know I'm pointing my clients to look at. Is how can you always the question is how can you help the state,
Right.
and how can you help the state when they're transitioning from 2 days a week in office to 4 days a week in office for all of their employees.
And I think for our technology partners, to think about this, it was an open question on whether or not the state was going to 100% return to office.
Yeah.
That was on the table as well. That the governor said for actually locks in that you need to design for hybrid.
Yep.
And that is a whole different set of questions that I haven't seen a formal state process for reconciling. One of the ones is, are we going to discriminate against the participant in the meeting who's participating remotely? Or are you going to design your meetings to fully accommodate people who are engaging remotely? And there's technology and collaboration technology that can make that a much better experience. The days of somebody just being on the speakerphone,
Yep.
and not really participating in the meeting. There's technology to minimize the impact of that remote person.
I think even just like think about the technology for like hoteling desks and space
Mm-hmm.
utilization. And I mean, parking's a huge issue for a lot of people now, or public transit and the technology around that. Like I was in Philadelphia last week and I rode the train there, and they were like, "No, you don't have to buy a ticket. You just hold your phone up to this sensor." And I'm like, "Do I need to like open Apple Pay or something?" And they were like, Literally just hold your phone up." Like they looked at me like I was an idiot, and I kind of was, because I
I
was like, "This is super fancy." Yeah, I just hold my phone up and it charges me whatever, and I ride the public transit. It was awesome. And I'm like, "We need this. Like, this is really cool." So, every change presents opportunity. And I think that's sort of how we should be positioning around this.
Well, I will pick your brain for for the vendor community. How do you think about, from a strategic perspective, if for hybrid on purpose, this hybrid on design, um, how do you approach it from a policy level, at the senior level, or do you do it department by department, agency? How do you think about approach to it?
So I do think it's one of those things where doing your homework is very helpful. And now, in addition to doing all the things we tell you to do before, right? Look at what they're buying, look at their budget, look at their strategic plans, look at their return to office mandates,
Mandates.
and see what they're dealing with. Look at the real estate they have. Are they Are they putting in more requests for real estate? Are they looking for solutions to help them? Do you need networking capabilities and infrastructure around these departments? So it should sort of be another question that you're adding in the discovery process of working with any department or agency. And it is going to be really individualized because they all have different needs and different requirements, frankly. So it's more homework for the industry to do, but I think it'll serve you well when you go to meet with a client and you can say, hey, we know you're
Doing the
encountering these issues.
right.
Tell me more about what issues you're having with meeting these executive order mandates, and let me tell you how we can help you.
That's a consistent theme in your tell me more and let me design a solution that helps you meet the problem that you've got. Well, I hope our listeners get some benefit out of that. Anything else you want to add before?
I mean, more to come. This is changing by the hour as we're sort of in the second half of June here, and the governor's budget starts July 1st. So more to come here, right?
All right. Thanks, Jen.